Today we are going to talk about cellular transport. That is the movement of substances into and out of cells. And the two types we're going to talk about are passive and active. Everything that comes into or leaves the cell does this through the cell membrane. And you can think of the cell membrane as a border patrol, which determines what comes in and what goes out. First, we're going to talk about passive transport that does not use energy. We'll talk about simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Then we're going to talk about active transport, which does that through protein pumps. And then we'll talk about moving big stuff into and out of cells through endocytosis and exocytosis. Before we talk about passive transport, we got to talk about concentration, because we talk about a concentration gradient. So concentration is the amount of a substance dissolved in a unit of another substance. So if we look at this picture of food coloring, we have a lower concentration of food coloring on the left and a higher concentration of food coloring on the right. So the concentration gradient is the difference in concentration of a particular molecule between two regions. So movement, the natural movement is always from high concentration to low concentration. Another way to say that is the net movement of molecules tends to be down a concentration gradient. So when you put a drop of food coloring into a glass of water, there is a high concentration of food coloring in that initial drop and a low concentration in the water. But because all molecules vibrate, eventually that food coloring will diffuse or move from the high concentration to the low concentration until there's an equal amount of food coloring throughout the water. So simple diffusion. This picture shows it. If you imagine that is a drop of food coloring, you can see that it goes from high concentration to low concentration. That's diffusion, and it requires no energy. Again, this is repeating about food coloring or dye. So diffusion across the membrane. When we're looking at solute, it goes from high concentration to low concentration. Simple diffusion going through the membrane. And the only things that really do simple diffusion in a cell membrane are really tiny things that can squeak by the phospholipids. And that are things that we saw in the game, like carbon dioxide, which is CO2. There's only 3 atoms, so it's really tiny. So that can diffuse through, and oxygen gas, which is O2. That's just 2 atoms that can move by as well. Now, facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion is for things that are bigger, like sugars or ions, things like that need to get into the cell. It is facilitated because it needs a protein channel. In this diagram, that's what the purple thing is. And imagine the yellow balls are maybe glucose or some sugar that need to get inside the cell. So it uses a protein channel. The sugar is way too big to squeeze in between these phospholipids in the membrane. So it uses a protein channel. Protein channels are fast, specific, and they require no energy. Membrane proteins provide channels for specific materials to move across the plasma membrane. That's basically what I said. Because it is diffusion, we are still going from high concentration to low concentration, and we're not using any energy. So here's a picture of facilitated diffusion. The purple thing is the protein channel, and we're going from high concentration to low concentration. And osmosis, that is the diffusion of water through the membrane. So the important terms to know about osmosis: the solvent is water. It's what dissolves the substance, and the solute is what's being dissolved. And we usually think about salt or sugar. Now, water, when it osmosis, it always wants to go where the most solute is. It loves salt. It loves sugar. So it's going to go to where the most salt or sugar is.